So next we're going to focus on SNAP student rules. And first I want to look at some definitions. So I've been saying household a lot, and you may have wondered what am I talking about? So here's the definition here, and we'll continue to talk about households because they're a very important concept under SNAP. And then we have some definitions here for student and institution of higher education. So in the SNAP program, a person is defined as a student if they are 18 to 49 years old, physically and mentally fit, and enrolled at least half-time in an institution of higher learning. And institutions of higher learning or higher education are defined as these things listed here. So it's any institution at the post-high school level that normally requires a high school diploma for enrollment. So things like colleges, business schools, vocational, technical schools, correspondence or online courses, and also degree programs regardless of whether a high school diploma is required. So anyone meeting this definition of a student at an institution of higher education is seen as a student under SNAP rules until they graduate or leave school for some reason. And then, and only then, can the individual access SNAP as a non-student. Also, when an individual is applying for SNAP and they meet the definition of a student who is at an institution of higher learning, they then must meet a student exemption to be eligible to receive SNAP benefits. So let's look at what those are and how we do that. Excuse me. In SNAP, there are special rules, and these rules limit the eligibility of certain groups of people, including students. SNAP rules for students are meant to make it harder for students to participate in SNAP. Under student rules, applicants must be screened to determine if they meet a risk factor for food insecurity called an exemption. If a student does not meet an exemption, they are considered an ineligible student and they are not eligible for SNAP until they graduate or leave school. If the student meets an exemption, they are considered an eligible student for SNAP until they graduate or leave school, and as long as they continue to meet all other SNAP eligibility criteria. And all of this is due to some misconceptions of who students are and lawmakers' assumptions of student fraud. Way back in 1980, federal law was created to restrict most college students enrolled at least half-time from receiving SNAP benefits. And this was done to prevent traditional college students from being able to apply and receive SNAP when they were, even though they may look like low income because they're in college, they're really being helped by their parents. And that's what traditional means, right? Students that are financially dependent on their parents, that don't have children, that have a diploma, that enter college full-time right after high school, and that are not employed. But at the same time, this rule was made so that SNAP would still be accessible for low-income students at risk who are not traditional students. And what we know now is that about 71% of students are no longer traditional students. So in order to do so, the burden of proof is put on the student, and they must prove to the SNAP office that they meet one of these extra conditions or exemptions before they can apply for SNAP. So a student has to either have an individual characteristic, things like being between 18 and 49, which we talked about before, which is a definition, or having an expected family contribution of 0 under FAFSA, or being a primary caregiver to children or incapacitated adults. And there's lots of rules around that I'm not giving you, so that's just a high level, or being unfit for work. Another bucket is students who are working, and that would be things like working 20 hours a week. That's the rule, that students must work 20 hours a week in order to be able to be eligible for SNAP. Or they could be eligible for work study, and they don't have to have any hourly work done. They just have to be eligible. And then the last bucket is this bucket of participating in a qualifying government program. And that includes students who are receiving unemployment, family assistance, which we call cash assistance or TANF, and safety net assistance. But back in October of last year, OTDA released a new exemption category around career and technical education, or CTE, programs for post-secondary students. And so the new exemption states that students who attend an educational opportunity center and are enrolled in a qualified career and technical education program or remedial course or basic adult education, literacy, or English as a second language are now determined to be SNAP eligible students. And so we are here today to take full advantage of this new opportunity that allows EOC and ATTAIN students to participate in SNAP. Our efforts today and going forward will help to shape and fulfill the Chancellor's promise to assist as many EOC and ATTAIN Lab students as possible in getting connected to SNAP and helping them to stay engaged in gaining the skills and education that can transform their lives, the lives of their families, and their communities. So one piece of this that EOCs play a huge role in is documenting the CTE exemption. And I'm going to show you the form that was created by OTDA for all of you and for SUNY and CUNYs, if it lets me. Be able to see this in a second. The nice thing about this form, which is not true of many of our SNAP forms, is it is very simple and clear. And that's super exciting and means there's no reason to recreate this. It's here for you. It was created for this reason, for this exemption specific for EOCs. And you'll see that you need information about the student. And then there's a section to be completed by the EOC. One of these questions is not for EOCs, and that's number 4. So that question is always going to be no. And the rest is just literally providing information about students. Also, just so you can see, we do need a signature from a staff member at the EOC or ATTAIN Lab. And just so you know, these can be electronic signatures on this form. They don't have to be handwritten. And each EOC and ATTAIN Lab is responsible for creating a process to make this form available in an easy to find location and to provide the information needed on the form pertaining to each student's circumstances. So you have to confirm and verify that the student actually meets the rule and is in a program like is listed. And so making the SNAP form easily accessible to students is key. Having the document in an easy to find location with information auto-filled is a best practice because we don't want students struggling to try to get this form signed and not know where the form is when they're trying to apply for SNAP. I want to say this again because I think this is something that's hard to understand. And if you're not in the SNAP world and you don't look at SNAP rules all the time, it doesn't even really totally make sense to folks. So I want to say it again so that we all can hear this and put it in our brains. And that is that students remain eligible or ineligible between school breaks, vacations, summers, unless something changes. Like they graduate, they are suspended or expelled, they drop out, or they do not intend to register for the next school term. For an eligible student, the applicant must still meet all other income and eligibility criteria in order to continue receiving a SNAP benefit, but they stay eligible. Only when a student no longer is determined to be a student because they left school can the individual qualify for SNAP without applying the student rules. And they also will need to meet all the other income and eligibility criteria in order to receive a benefit. So let's talk about what that is. And I just want you to know, I don't know why these slides won't turn for me. There you go. We're on this is the last section about SNAP. So it's almost over. And this is a simple overview of the SNAP application process so that you can best assist students who are looking to apply. This does not make you an application assister. There are much longer trainings for folks who are doing application assistance. And a couple of things to keep in mind. There are application assisters in your community who can help your students. And we'll be starting those introductions today. So you do not have to know all of this, but being familiar with the SNAP application process, you can help you better assist your students through applying for and receiving SNAP benefits. And the other thing to remember is that only the SNAP office can determine if a student is eligible. You are just helping them through the process of applying and helping them make some of those determinations based on the information you have about the student. So let's talk about some of these SNAP rules that apply to everyone. So we talked about how to determine if a student is a SNAP eligible student, right? But there are additional SNAP income and eligibility rules that all SNAP applicants, including students, must meet in order to qualify to receive a SNAP benefit each month. So let's talk about how we determine if a student is eligible for a SNAP benefit amount. And there are a few things that we have to determine before starting an application with a student. And these include household composition, immigration status, and gross income test. So the first thing we're going to talk about is household composition. And what you're seeing here is our household composition desk guide, which actually walks folks through by asking questions. And you can, it helps decide who in the household has to apply together. And a SNAP household is defined as people who live together and purchase and prepare meals together. And household composition is really important when you're screening for SNAP eligibility, because individuals included in the SNAP household must have all of their income counted when determining eligibility and looking at gross income. And under SNAP rules, we have something called mandatory household members, meaning even if people are living in the same house, meaning that if people are living in the same house, they must be included in the SNAP household, even if they are not purchasing and preparing meals together. Mandatory household members include spouses, and they include parents, natural, adopted, or step parents, and their children under 22. This has often been a barrier for college students who are still living at home and therefore must apply with their parents in order to be eligible, which means the parents' income counts and often means the student is not eligible. Outside of mandatory household members, other people who may live together can choose not to purchase and prepare meals together and can be separate households. So that is that concept. I want to talk for a second about immigrant eligibility. I'm giving you a super sky high view of this. Like student rules, these rules are designed to limit the participation of immigrants to those with low incomes who are at risk of facing food insecurity. And there's also some timeframes for how long people have to be here before they're eligible for SNAP. We're not going to talk in depth about any of those things, but these rules, it's important to know, they only apply to non-citizens who are legally present in the country. And naturalized citizens, immigrants who become citizens, are eligible to receive SNAP benefits like all other citizens. But undocumented non-citizens, those who aren't here legally and cannot prove that they're here legally, are never eligible for SNAP. Households containing ineligible non-citizens can still apply for SNAP if someone in the household is an eligible non-citizen or US citizen. So for example, an undocumented parent can apply for SNAP on behalf of their eligible non-citizen or citizen children. And I just want to take 1 minute to talk about the recent news on public charge. It's something that a lot of people, especially people in immigrant communities, heard the messages loud and clear. And some changes have happened just last month. And the Department of Homeland Security public charge rule was permanently blocked nationwide in March. And this means that the Department of Homeland Security can no longer consider an individual's use or potential use of SNAP as a factor in a public charge test. This will immediately provide relief in many hard-hit communities as the public charge regulation effectively denied millions of immigrants and their families needed help, contributing to rising poverty, hunger, and unmet healthcare needs even before COVID-19 pandemic began. When a student is an immigrant or worried about public charge, the EOC or TAIN Lab should make a referral and get the student to a NOAA coordinator for additional help. And we're going to talk a lot more about how that happens. So expanded categorical eligibility is granted to most households applying for SNAP in New York State. And what this does is let higher income households come into the program. In the past, we only used 130% of poverty. It also takes away some tests that can keep people from being eligible. For example, before we had categorical eligibility, people had to meet a resource test. And for most households, that resource test is $2,250. Under categorical eligibility, they don't have to meet a resource test. They do have to meet a gross income test. So for a household of 3, if they had an elderly or disabled member, someone 60 or older, or have childcare costs, they can use a higher income. They can use 200% of poverty and come in at $3,620, which is quite a bit higher than our 130% of poverty. This is the gross income test, and they can't even go a penny over. For households not meeting those criteria, they can use 150% of poverty, and this is for if they have earned income. And you can see for a household of 3, that would let them come into the program at $2,715 as a gross income. Anything above that, they are not eligible. And lastly, we have the 130, which you can see is a much lower amount at $2,353. And if anyone is a penny over, they're not eligible for SNAP. So how do people apply? Well, people must apply for SNAP by filing an application at a local SNAP office in the county they reside. You can see we have online applications, which are probably going to be best for students as they have access to computers, they like computers, they use computers in their daily lives. And we have an application specific to New York City, Access NYC, and one for rest of state, which is mybenefits.ny.gov. These are online tools available to all New York City and New York State residents to help them connect with benefits, services, and work support. And so people can screen themselves here and they can get information about what programs they may be eligible for, and then they can actually apply. And of course, if someone doesn't have a computer or doesn't want to use that, we still have paper applications, and this provides you with information about how to get those. And New York State does have alternative format applications for people with visual impairments. We need to talk a little bit about the application timeline because SNAP has very specific timelines that must be met. And this is federal law. We talked about how Congress is the top over SNAP. and USDA, FNCS, creates the laws around SNAP. And one of them is a timeliness issue. So when the SNAP office receives an application, it has 30 days to act on the application and issue SNAP benefits if the household is eligible. And there are certain things that have to happen during this time frame, during this 30 days. Everyone who is applying for SNAP gets screened for expedited benefits, which are provided in 7 business days. But these are only for households with little to no income or resources. And it's just a way to get SNAP benefits to people more quickly than the regular 30-day process. So it's just a different process, and not everyone is eligible for these expedited benefits, but everyone will be screened. And then the next thing that happens is households are interviewed. And during that interview, the caseworker requests any missing documentation and provides the applicant with a time frame to get that back and ways that they can do that. And by the end of the 30 days, the SNAP office has to approve or deny the application. So let's talk about these steps a little bit more. So all SNAP applicants must be interviewed, either over the phone or in person when requested, as quickly as possible, either at the time of application submission or at a later date, and within 7 days of submitting the application if eligible for expedited. New York City actually has what is called on-demand interviews, kind of like Spectrum, right? And after returning their application, new SNAP applicants in New York City can call HRA between 8:30 and 5 p.m., Monday through Friday, for an on-demand interview, giving clients more flexibility. During the application or the interview, the SNAP worker will review the application, they'll clarify any incomplete or confusing information, they'll provide a list of any missing documents and explain what the documents are, and they'll give the applicant a deadline for getting those back in. Documentation and verification is super important in SNAP and can be a barrier for people. All eligibility criteria must be verified before an applicant can be determined to be eligible to receive a SNAP benefit. And SNAP offices use a variety of ways to verify information, but even if they know the information is true, it has to be documented in the case file, because USDA comes and checks on those and does quality control with the state agency and the SNAP offices. And so they have to be correct about these things. Any reasonable form of documentation must be accepted and cannot be limited to any single type. So for example, one document may serve as verification for more than one eligibility criterion, right? So a birth certificate can serve as a verification for identity, date of birth, and citizenship. SNAP rules require that SNAP workers get proof of the following before a SNAP application can be approved. And these are 7 things: the identity of the applicant, household size, age, citizenship status, immigration status, social security numbers, income and resources, and residence in the county. Then there are a few items that are only used for budgeting. And this will not hold up the application process if people cannot verify them, but it will impact the benefit amount. And these are things like shelter and utility costs, childcare and child support, medical expenses, which are only for people 60 and older or disabled, people with disabilities. And also if someone has a disability, it's important for that to be verified because there are special budgeting rules and they are exempt from work activities along with seniors. And the last thing that I want to say is during COVID, right now we have an interview waiver for households when they are applying and when they are recertifying. And that is through June 30th, 2021. So instead of having to have an interview, applicants must submit the necessary documentation, those 1 through 7 that I talked about. And if it's complete and not questionable, then the interview can be waived. And this was because so many people were applying when COVID happened. People lost jobs. They were sick. They were facing all kinds of things they'd never faced before. And so USDA and our state allowed people to waive the interview to make it easier. And SNAP offices have a choice in waiving interviews, although we still understand that most counties in New York State are doing this right now. Another thing that New York State did recently, New York City was first, is they have ways that households can upload documentation to the SNAP office using technology. So one is our websites, our online application sites, which we talked about before. And in New York City, that is HRA. We also have mobile applications, and you can see that HRA has Access HRA, and New York State or Upstate has New York Doc Submit mobile application. And this is by, you can use your phone to take a picture of a document and identify what it is and upload it so it goes to the county, to your local SNAP office. Documentation can also be submitted at the local SNAP office or by an application assister who's helping a client. All right, so we have 2 slides left, and then we're going to get to the more fun part of this presentation. Thank you for sticking with me. So people have to know at the end of 30 days, are they going to get SNAP benefits or not? So the SNAP office has to send a notice telling the applicant its decision within 30 calendar days of the application filing date. If the applicant qualifies for SNAP, the notice of acceptance has to have certain information on it, and it's here on your slide. If the applicant does not qualify for SNAP, the notice of denial must explain the reasons for the denial and provide some information for contacting the office about how to ask for a fair hearing if they don't think the determination was correct, and how to get free legal help for that fair hearing. And New York State uses an automated computer notice system for most notices. These notices are long and include a lot of information, including how the budget was calculated. If there is any mistakes, these can be identified and mediated on with the SNAP office by the student, by the EOC and Attain Lab, or by the NOAA coordinator who may be helping the student, or an application assister. And the last slide is getting the EBT card, right? So I've said this before, but here's a picture, and here's what New York State's EBT card look like. People receive SNAP benefits, they receive family assistance or cash benefits known as TANF, and they also receive Medicaid health insurance, all on this CIVIC or EBT card. And additionally, during COVID, this is how they receive the EAs, the emergency allotments of SNAP, and pandemic EBT for the children's school meals that they have missed. And SNAP participants use their EBT cards at machines, at checkout counters, just like debit and credit cards. So with that, I'm going to end this part of the presentation, and we'll get